So we're told predictive analytics can help us see what's coming next, and sometimes it does. There's the case of the US retailer Target predicting a teenager's pregnancy before her own family knew. Impressive, but a little bit unsettling. But it doesn't always get it right. Google Flu Trends once overestimated flu outbreaks by more than double, confusing media coverage with real illness. And sometimes it just gets us wrong. For example, Spotify might decide your favorite genre is nursery rhymes because you played one song on repeat to your daughter. And there are deeper risks too. Amazon built a hiring tool that learned to favor male candidates from biased data. So it's powerful, but not neutral or infallible. I'm Mark Britton, and joining me today is Ian Bobbett, Crimson's Chief Data Officer. In this episode of the Digital Lounge, we're exploring where predictive analytics delivers real value and where leaders need to tread carefully. Ian, great to have you back on the Digital Lounge again. So yes, today is all about predictive analytics. It's not new, it's been around a while, yet so many organizations, looking at the blog that you shared on Crimson's blog recently, as you highlight, organizations still struggle to get value from it. Where do you think they're going wrong?
Oh, blimey. It's a big question to start with, Mark. Predictive analytics is a really powerful tool, and you're right, it has been around a long time. Unlike a lot of the perhaps newer AI solutions, it's pretty tried and tested. The algorithms are very good. The work tends to be, very standardized in approaches. But organizations inevitably do get it wrong, and I suppose there's two main places that organizations run a risk. And the first one, there's a very obvious one, is data quality. So perhaps you're getting your predictive information based on data that's biased or out and out incorrect or incomplete, and it kind of risks leading you down a garden path that perhaps you weren't intending to. And probably the other way that is kind of common is perhaps not quite correctly defining your target outcome. So predictive analytics needs a target outcome. What are you trying to achieve? Often it's a yes or no. Sometimes it's a continuum of data that you're trying to predict. But making sure you're understanding what you're trying to predict and along the timeline of, for example, a customer experience where you're trying to predict it, is really, really important, because and you see this quite a lot. Lead scoring is a great example, not necessarily a predictive model, but can be. You'll see instances where the information that's used is kind of too far down the path. So an example might be, if you're trying to sell a car, for example, if someone's taken 2 test drives and has applied for finance, you don't really need a lead score telling you that they're a hot lead. You know that already, right? So knowing where a predictive model will add value within whatever you're trying to predict is also really important.
Okay, yeah, because I was going to come on to sort of where do you see things going wrong between building the model and then actually driving decisions? Where have you seen that fall down?
Yeah. I've had a long career in data, Mark, as you know, and probably one of the hardest things that I think a lot of people who work in data struggle with is that translation to business. So if you imagine what happens when you're building a predictive model, you might have a data scientist who's elbow deep in lots of complex data. They're going through their process of their exploratory data analysis, model building, validation, hypertuning. They're kind of going through their very technical process, and essentially a meaningless score is often the output of a predictive model, except unless you're a data scientist, right? So then translating that into something that's highly usable by people in the business is something that is a really significant consideration. So might as well stick with the theme of lead scoring. Giving a salesperson a metric that might be 0.784134 is not particularly helpful compared to give them a rag status of this is a hot lead, this is a medium lead, this is a cool lead. So this is where you should prioritize your time. Then opening the black box. So a lot of modern algorithms are very black box. So not just giving again, we'll stick with the sales lead, we might as well. Not just giving, the hot lead, but also explaining why they're a hot lead. So humanizing the data. Say, we think this person is a hot lead because they've been online to our website, they've looked at a certain type of car, and they're always looking at that specific type of car. So they're quite focused on what they want to buy. So they understand what kind of vehicle they're buying. They've looked at 2 or 3 second-hand options, for example. Those might be really key indicators that someone wants to buy a car. But the way that might transpire in a predictive model might be really opaque. So just humanizing it and giving information as to why you think that's a hot lead, or why a decision should be taken often helps as well. So we talk a lot in Crimson about activation. So when we put these types of solutions in place, how do we activate it so that people will adopt, engage, and get value from it? But also, how do we measure and make sure that the solution continues to add value? Because for me, a lot of the time, definitely not all of the time, but a lot of the time, when you do a predictive model, what you want to do is you want people to change behaviors. So an example might be, well, actually, we're going to switch our sales process around a little bit when someone's buying a car. So then that process change might manifest in your data. So then all your data has changed. So then you need to recalibrate your predictive model. So it does become a bit of a cycle. But as with most technical projects, they don't often go wrong in the technology or the technical part of it. They go wrong in the communication, adoption, embedding side of things, and making things approachable is really critical.
Right. Okay. So in the blog post, you emphasize data quality over model complexity. But as we're seeing at the moment, a lot of organizations are jumping straight to AI.
Yeah.
Why does that happen? What's the risk with doing that?
Why does it happen? It certainly doesn't happen all the time, but it happens regularly enough that I think a lot in the industry are very aware of it. In terms of AI outside of machine learning, you do hear a lot of metrics coming around that a lot of AI initiatives fail. And data quality is super important. Not just data quality anymore. Data and information quality is really important. There's an old adage, I think it might even be in the blog, of garbage in, garbage out, right? And that old adage, gosh, that's predates my career, so it's a very old adage. And it was applied to databases. If you put poor quality data into a system, you can't expect the system to magically make it better and get the answers you need. So all AI, whether it's machine learning, deep learning, whatever branch of AI you're looking at, the algorithms are the engine, but the fuel is the data. So, if you put rubbish fuel into an engine, you're going to have problems. The engine won't start, it won't work, it'll fail quickly. So yeah, I personally, I think probably every data scientist I've worked with and managed would hopefully know this. It's you're better to have high quality data and sensible inputs rather than try and boil the ocean with a deeply technical solution that might only give you a marginal gain. You get bigger gains from the basics than you probably do from some of the most extreme transformations or whatever. So and you do run a risk, if you've got poor quality data, of getting outcomes that are not right. And I've seen that enough in my career to kind of go, you do have to make sure the process is right, validate, test, but also trust your gut instinct as well. I've seen it enough where someone's presented a model, said these are the drivers. I'm like, I'm not sure that makes sense in the real world. So there's a lot of safeguards that can be put in place to support the creation of a good solution.
Yeah, because it's interesting. Sometimes it's counterintuitive with data. Sometimes, isn't it? People make assumptions, or logic gets a little bit mixed up, and that's the kind of the special skill, I think, for people that are working with data. This kind of complexity.
It's a funny one, isn't it? It's very easy to trust data, but you shouldn't always trust data. You should always be kind of thinking about what the data means, how that applies in the real world. But yeah, I think there's a case study that we talk about from my career quite a bit that doesn't have a lot of logic, but when you kind of sit down and analyze what happens, it makes sense. The classic one in industry is beer and nappies, isn't it? Why would people buy beer and nappies together as complementary items? Well, because you've got a young kid and you can't get down the pub. So that doesn't mean you should put beer and nappies next to each other in a supermarket, by the way.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting correlation, I suppose. But that doesn't mean you necessarily change behaviour on that.
Yeah, and I was going to come on to that. So what does good look like with predictive analytics when it's working well inside an organization day to day? Where have you seen that really working well?
Well, plenty of places, I suppose, is the short and glib answer. To me, when a predictive solution is working well, two things happen. You get a return on investment, or you see a change in behavior. So a return on investment is a really simple thing. I did some work with a travel company quite a few years ago, and it was looking at selling excursions. It's a tour company. It looks at selling excursions, and the ROI is really simple. I now sell more excursions, but there's also a behavior change. The people selling excursions spend less time on people who are really unlikely to buy an excursion, and more time on people who the algorithm is telling them are likely to buy an excursion. And so there's a behavioral change as well. So those are the two things I generally look at. You start to do something different from a organizational or business perspective, and there's a hard metric. It's not necessarily financial, but there's a hard success criteria that is measurable, that you can look at and see a change.
Yeah.
And I would emphasize, actually, Mark, we work a lot in public sector as a business. Sometimes the financial benefit may be realized through an indirect action. So a classic example for us at the moment would be, for example, if we enabled social workers in local and regional government to spend less time doing low value administrative tasks and more time focused on high value tasks, such as time directly with citizens, spending more time being able to think about how to help, downstream consequences, impacts, you might see a benefit of your direct benefit might be the behavioral change. So social workers, for example, spending more time with citizens, but your indirect financial benefit might be in 2 years' time, I'm seeing a lot fewer children coming into the children looked after kind of phase. So children in care, because social workers have been able to invest up front because you freed up time elsewhere within their day job. So those metrics don't always have to be financial. I think value is what we talk about at Crimson, and value can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different businesses. It might be customer experience, it might be a lot of things.
Yeah, I was going to just touch on ROI and how you are able to identify strong ROI cases. Do you have a methodology for that? Because sometimes, as you say, we're working in sectors that aren't thinking in those very sort of black and white commercial terms. That must be quite difficult to unpick sometimes.
I mean, it is difficult to unpick, but I suppose what I look for is what's valuable to my clients. You know, and you know, social care, the example, what the constraint really is time, because you've a limited number of social care practitioners, and they you know often put in a lot more hours than they're paid for, so they're a very tight constraint. So the value, you can put a pound sign against the value, but really what you're giving back is time, and that time is then reinvested in tasks that may have quite an indirect value metric, but often an organization will know that that's right. So you do need some kind of metric. Time's a good one. Money's always a really good one because people understand it and it's very direct and tangible. But often the benefits, and I've seen it on occasions where the downstream benefits have outweighed the immediate tangible benefits. So kind of thinking through what those benefits are is really important. So the way we do that is through the Crimson framework for AI and the Crimson framework for IQ, both similar in certain phases. And what those frameworks do is they allow us to work with our clients collaboratively, interactively as one team to understand what value means to them, where they think the value sits, and create solutions that align to those beliefs and the evidence that is presented to us from data and information. And you know, it might be a care quality assessment. You know, just ROI is really important. Value is a hard metric.
Yeah, I can imagine. So, well, once you've proven that a case is sound, it works, what steps or what's key to be able to scale that across the organization and really get that that engine really humming?
So inevitably the technical aspect is really important. You know, having the right foundational data, having the right, you know, systems in place where you can surface information to colleagues if that's the need. But in my experience, where projects sometimes struggle is adoption and embedding. So, you know, if you go all the way back to a lead score, if a salesperson doesn't believe the lead score, they won't use it. They'll trust their instincts because they've always done that. It's familiar and it's safe. And embedding and adopting is built on trust and evidence. So trust is, I can demonstrate that I've listened to what you've said to me, and I've tried to build a solution that aligns to those needs, and I can evidence that by either running a proof of concept or kind of almost a simulation, I suppose. Not quite a simulation from a technical perspective, but a simulation that kind of explains, you know, if we could have done this and identified these 7 extra customers, this is the benefit that you personally would have had, because there is a virtuous circle that you want to get in place in this instance. And what I mean by that is, when you put a solution in that people adopt and use, they feed back into the solution. And so the classic example is no, actually not a classic example. We'll stick with lead scoring. When you build a lead score, if the salesperson is seeing a material benefit from using that lead score, they'll put better data into the system. And what that means is the lead score then gets better because it's got better information. So you kind of get that virtuous circle of all the harder I work for the system, the harder the system is going to work for me. So there's a real kind of I talk a lot about virtuous circles, Mark, and I'm sure it bores you to death, but I'm a real big believer that you need to set up success in that way as much as possible.
No, I on the contrary, and I find the whole topic fascinating, and I know a lot of clients at the moment are asking about how we can help them with data, and I think the whole AI message at the moment has really shone a light on the problems people have with data. And I just want to sort of round up with one final question, if I may, which is, how can we begin to help an organization move from that insight to impact? What's the journey that we can take somebody on that's probably thinking, what we could really do with some help around building a predictive analytics strategy? What would you recommend if someone were to contact us about that?
So we adhere pretty tightly to the Crimson IQ framework in that instance, which is a structured and very disciplined approach to understanding where the business is and where it wants to be, mapping out those use cases that will get you there, making sure that you put in the data foundations that will enable the solution, making sure that you're then doing 2 things, probably a bit more in parallel, making sure that you're democratizing information. So if you're improving data and you're making it more or better quality, then making it available is really, really important. But also you then also have the foundations to build predictive models and data science solutions, I suppose at its widest, but machine learning really is what we're talking about. So you have that foundation of machine learning data that you can build off. It's granular enough, it's broad enough, it's deep enough, it's of high enough quality to enable your data scientists or our data scientists to develop models and validate them. And then there is in place there's a, we talked about it earlier, the way it's activated in your business is usable, approachable, people will adopt it, people will understand the value. So a lot about training comms. So we adhere really tightly to the framework. It is what we always do. And that framework has been very successful.
Brilliant. Ian, appreciate your time as always. Thank you for the recent blog. Just for listeners, viewers that are joining us today, you'll find that at crimson.co.uk if you want to learn a little bit more. But we're always keen to hear from viewers about what they'd like to hear on the show. But for now, Ian, thank you very much for joining us on the Digital Lounge, and we'll see you again very soon.
Thanks, Mark. Take care now.
Okay, bye.